Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Nom Talk Network. It is so good to see you all again. Um, it is me, Jordyn Orozco, and I'm going to be talking about something different tonight. Usually I do Nom Watch Review, but tonight, welcome to Basic Binges, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review popular shows that are out now while eating and drinking our favorite binge-worthy snacks and drinks. So as you already know, my name is Jordyn. It's all good to see you all. Here are my guests. I have been on some other ones. I know and love them. They are all amazing. Hi, Alejandro, Jefferson, and Bill. How are you all? Let's go one by one. What are you all snacking on? Bill, hello. Hi from San Francisco. Hello from LA.
Hey,
What are you snacking on? What's going on?
dude, snacking not so much. I'm still recovering from having far too much shabu a little bit ago. But right now it's Coke Zero to wash it all down.
Absolutely. I mean, the best recovery
Is
ever.
that shabu
Um,
shabu or like the
Yep.
beef?
Nah,
Nice,
shabu shabu. Yeah.
nice.
nice. That sounds yummy. Jefferson, what's going on? It's been a
It,
while.
it has been a
Um,
while. Not since
yeah.
the Power Rangers Turbo movie, I want to say.
No, it was the first Power Rangers. I think. Were you on that
No, I
one?
wasn't there. I was there for. Oh shit! It was the first Power Rangers movie. Yeah. Mighty Morphin, Mighty Morphin.
Yes. Anyway, what are you snacking on? What are you chomping on?
Snacking on some coconut keto clusters and enjoying the fuck out of Sandman. Um, both the show and the comic right now.
Love it. I love it. And Alejandro, certainly not least, but last. What's going on?
Hey. Excited to be here. Let's see here. I'm normally a pig, so I'll continue that tradition. I got a bowl of ramen noodles here, some hot fries over here. I have to go in to say I sneak in the original Coke. I got some peach gummies around here somewhere, so I'm a little still in the mood of searching them. And of course, got to stay hydrated because it's a lot of sugar. But I'm
Yeah,
good. I'm ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in case any of you haven't noticed from Jefferson's little or my little background, but today we are talking about the Sandman episodes 1 and 2. I gotta say, y'all, gentlemen, this was probably a a really surprisingly good 2 episodes into this entire series. I will say for me, beginning with sort of me hearing that they were going to come out with this, I immediately went on a deep dive into Wikipedia just to kind of like get a little like reference background to exactly what this was about. Because we're all used to sort of superhero movies, right? Like Marvel did all this whole thing, like phase one, phase two, phase three, did all this stuff. We've had Endgame, we've had Infinity Wars, we've had everything, right? And then and slowly DC sort of catching up with all this stuff. Well, I heard about Sandman and I was like, let me hear about it and let me see what's going on. And just sort of getting into the lore of Sandman was very interesting. And then watching episodes 1 and 2, I do have to say, I immediately fell in love with this show immediately from episode 1. And putting aside the LGBTQ plus, like the themes in this fucking show with that, I'll put that aside because we'll talk about that later. My history with this sort of comic book and everything that's been put out was basically zero, and I immediately fell in love, and I want to purchase every single one of the comics, so I can definitely get into it. Let's talk about our just introduction to this, our just sort of the ways that we have been introduced to Sandman. So let's start with Jefferson. I know you were kind of like showing off the comics earlier, and I'm so excited because now I can like purchase them, do all that stuff. What was your introduction to the
Cereal
show?
box. This
Yeah,
is the case for this. It's a cereal box.
I love it.
They're so cool. There's like 5 of them. I have 3 out of 5. So like the Gravity Falls books, you got to have them all. I don't have them all yet, but eventually I will. But then they also have the paperbacks, which are a lot more affordable and just easier to handle. These are at Barnes and Nobles right now. They're great. But my introduction to Sandman was I was actually a mixture of knowing the Justice Society of America was comprised of Jay Garrick Flash, Carter Hall, Hawkman, and some dude named Wesley Dodds, Sandman, right? Like guy with the gas mask. And it's like he's just a hero that puts people to sleep. And so I was like, why is this cool? Why do we care about this? And so I looked him up. I went on a deep dive to like years ago, and I saw that Neil Gaiman had his own run on Sandman. It's like, what could he possibly do with Sandman? And he just completely invented it. And I didn't like touch the comics until the pandemic hit. I didn't buy these until like lockdown happened, and it's been a blast. Like, I think I was actually reminded of the Sandman books when I was Googling the top scariest comics in DC or ever, and one of the issues that one of the articles came up was a 24/7 diner, and we're not gonna get to that yet, but yeah, no, that's kind of what like pulled me in. Like, why was 24/7 diner that impactful? And we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that Neil Gaiman was the one that originally like did the comics. He also, and I know Bill, you wanted to touch on this later. He also wrote the book American Gods, which was a show that came out on Showtime, which I was a huge fan of first and kind of half of the second, and maybe second season in total. But he is an amazing author. He's an amazing writer who completely built a story behind this person and created this entire world of like what they're called the endless, right? Like an entire world of people that interact with this, not only just the human world, but the world that we look at as myth or religion, and things that just like everything overlaps in layers, in this entire series. So I think it's really great. Bill, let's go to you. What was your introduction to the show? Was this your first time?
Yeah, this was my first time diving in with the whole thing. I've never read the comics. I'm familiar with the art. I mean, it's kind of hard, to be around kind of DC at all and not see some of that iconography running around. But as far as like stories and the storylines, I really had zero. And so it was a really neat kind of dive into it. And even with someone that doesn't have any background in it, following the story and motivations, kind of like what's going on, it's a combination of it's straightforward to follow, and the mysteries are enough of a mystery without just seeming like I'm just confused. I'm clear I don't know what I'm talking, what's going on here. So it's an easy get into.
Yeah, that's great. Alejandro, what about you? What was your introduction to this? Did you have any? How did you feel?
Mine was actually kind of sweet and simple. I came from the, I would say, a brand new perspective in reality that I've never read the comics, heard of a lot. I was introduced to him through American Gods. Actually, we worked with a couple companies in which they had like contact with him in other sorts of ways. So actually seeing, hints of art and just the, little details of story here and there, I was actually amazed that throughout like a paragraph, I could be actually thrown in a loop in a sense. I had no idea what was going on, and yet one paragraph was like, I gotta read this eventually at some point. So actually being introduced to this in regards to like as a show, I thought it was great. Because I had no history of it in regards to the foundation of the story. So initially, just the whole interaction, the pacing, I was immediately hooked.
Yeah, I think it was one of those shows that if it got to a point where I was like, it could have gone off the rails to the point where I didn't want to watch it. Where it was like, if it was like it got weird. It got weird in a way where I was like, I'm hooked. I want more. But like, my dad was like, oh, I kind of want to watch that. And I was like, are you sure? Like, you don't know what it's about. But he came in, I think I was watching the first episode, and it was the point where he basically, so I guess we'll talk about the first episode. This is the first ever.
Yeah.
So the first episode, basically, magic exists in the world, and humans can actually do magic, and they can, do spells and all that stuff. This is sort of like, and we'll talk about this in later episodes, but basically this is like the world where the Constantines are like an actual thing, and like people can actually control and do magic in the real world that are humans. The endless are a part, and everybody else is a part of that sort of realm in which if there's a strong enough spell, they can be called upon, or they can be asked to do certain things, which includes demons, which includes all that stuff. And in the first episode, there is an individual, and I have to go back and remember his name. If any of you remember it, please shout it out.
Burgess.
Thank you, Burgess. He's basically known as like the Demon King, which he wants to summon death because his son and another individual's son, this individual found a book of spells that can potentially summon death, who he wants to summon and bring back both of their sons. Well, instead of death, he gets Dream, which is the Sandman, which is the individual that we will be talking about, which is this crazy haired mofo behind me. And basically, death creates not only dreams but nightmares as well. Am I getting this right?
You said death, you meant dream.
Dream creates dreams and nightmares which can manifest themselves within the real world. One of those nightmares basically gets released into the world and starts killing people. And this nightmare is known as the Corinthian. And so sorry, I had all this pulled up. So Dream is played by Tom Sturridge, and Corinthian is played by Boyd Holbrook. You may have seen Boyd Holbrook in a couple of things that he has done. Long story short, while he's trying to bring back the Corinthian to the dream world, or get rid of him, he gets summoned instead of death, and they trap Dream for it was about a century, right? It was about 100 years. Yeah. And in those 100 years, all this stuff happened, right? He can't get out. All that, but when he does get out, he learns that the pieces that require him to be Dream have been stolen. He has 3 pieces, which are his sand, which is in a pouch. He's got his helm, which is like a helmet, and he's got his ruby, which basically lets him control how people dream, how they don't dream, all that other stuff. That's a short synopsis of like what happens. There's so much that happens within the first episode that I'm like, whoa, like what's going on? But I think for me, one of the things that hooked me was when he did get released. He basically gets pulled up. He opens a sort of like a portal back to his realm, which is Dream, the Dream realm, and he basically finds out that it's in ruins because he's been gone for so long. Everybody that followed him is gone. They've deserted the entire place, and the only person that is left is a librarian that worked in this sort of dream realm. Lucien, who is amazing, and oh my gosh, is played by the wonderful Vivienne Achimapong, and I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. She's amazing. She's awesome. How did we all feel about the first episode? I know for me, I think the acting made it for me. I think the people that had been in it made it for me. The characters by themselves, I think, were very well played. And just sort of seeing how I think Burgess's son, the son that you basically get a whole story arc of him in one episode. And I think it's important to point out that sort of relationship was an LGBTQ relationship where he sort of got with this guy who was the gardener. And they sort of, he even says, the Sandman actually says in the movie that while I was captured, there was love that blossomed from it. And the struggle that sort of like the son had between releasing him and keeping him for certain reasons. But what did we all think about the first episode? Alejandro, we'll go to you.
It was great. The ability to actually be, taking, you would think initially, taking the main character, in my opinion, Sandman, and actually having him silent throughout the whole thing would be disastrous. And it wasn't. I mean, it could have went south horribly. But the ability of the other actors coming in, taking, the Demon King himself and relieving his son and showing, the dark, history between them and like the lack of love for one son and more to the other. It was just like, heart-wrenching in a sense. It made you feel in a sense towards the individual. So yes, I see an antagonist in the beginning, which obviously to me was like I'm going to call it the Demon King's family, because essentially it was them. But at the same time, you had some empathy for the rest of them, because here they are following this, hard-headed guy that was supposed to be motivated by love, and now that love is like manipulated into hate, and it's just intense. And the thing is that you're sitting there and you want to root for the Sandman. At the same time, you're like, oh, what's going on? And not even to mention, I don't, because I've been so much into the series that transcended beyond episode 3 and 4, so I try to make sure I'm not mentioning anything that I'm not supposed to mention. But just mentioning the familiar in a sense, just that ability to just being stuck in this area, because you said like 100 years, right? Just stuck in this one thing. And you want to root for the Sandman so badly. And yet you're like, have some empathy for the rest of the family. Because like the Demon King's the asshole that you have to deal with. But at the same time, the actions that follow, you start to see, and you just get this mixed wave of emotions of who you're really feeling for. Yes, the title, the Sandman, is who we're there for, but at the same time, I thought it was well written. I was surprised. I thought this could have gone south. I hated the characters for the first 30 minutes. It's like, how can you do that? Let him go. Why steal his stuff? And then all of a sudden, it just kept going and going. And I just thought, ugh. So initially, I don't get too much into this. It was great. The first episode was intense, and I enjoyed it very much so.
Definitely. Bill, you know me, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. What did you think about the first episode?
Sorry, there I even tunneled joke and everything. Sorry, that'll do.
Do it again. Do it again.
Oh, I just said that's cool. No, it was amazing, because something that is, kind of like Alex said, he's not saying a lot. You're not giving a lot to an audience, especially that's not familiar with the story very much to begin with. It could have been extraordinarily boring. It could have been kind of just, okay, whatever. Oh, it's Daddy Lannister being a dick. There's something different. But it's not. There was more to it, and the way that the characterizations were there, and it was kind of neat, like when he is being kind of gated up back into the dream realm towards the end of the episode. It's one, you can tell that, okay, this is straight out of the comic from somewhere, you can tell, but it's also just a great image. And it could have also been corny. Okay, you got a dude naked sitting in a sphere for 100 years, no food, no nothing, whatever, but it works. He's a very believable performer with the way he did it, and it could have so close ended up being, dude, he looks like Edward from Twilight, and you just kind of expect him to sparkle, but he's not. He's actually much more of a controlled. I like the presence kind of notion that we're reminded a couple times that he looks human, but he's clearly not human. He has no particular human empathies. He's got a job to do, and this happens to be the universe he's in right now, for the next one. And because there's all of these points, and it's always interesting. There's these little grace notes and hooks. It's like at the one point where the son is leaving for the last time down in the basement. It's like, are you gonna help me out or not? No? Okay, well, I'm not coming back again. And what they do with the wheelchair and stuff, and then I forget the fellow's name who's pushing him, but pushing the wheelchair, but he pushes, turns around, looks, you can read what you want to into the motivations. Was it the instruction for him to do it? Was it his own impetus that decided to cause the next chain of events? And all of those pieces really work. And so it's like, I found, and I'll even just as a quick spoiler, it's like not just the episode, but all the way through, you just keep wanting to go on to the next. And I thought it was really effective, especially for a season. A lot of times I got to go for an episode or two to kind of figure out what's going on. No, end of this episode, you're good. Just next.
Yeah. Which I was very surprised at, because usually I'm like one of those, like, I'll give it 3 episodes and then call it quits if like I'm just not into it. But after the end of this first one, I was like, next one. I was like, what's going on? What just happened? And I think you both bring up a good point where it was like, he didn't talk. Like, you only heard him thinking. There was no speech that was actually given, because he was just like, he was captured. He didn't want to give anything away. And, he had his Raven killed, right? Like, who was number one, like, sidekick, for Dream. And so I think that was really important. I also, I think too, like, obviously a naked man in anything in this sort of instance is like, oh, what's going on for me, right? Like, but that's just me. But I also do feel like the way that everything was just stripped from him was very telling of how humans and how people don't necessarily care about, let's say, for example, a personified version of a god, right? Like of somebody that, they could potentially maybe worship or like get something from, they just took everything from him. And they were like, okay, well, you're not going to give us what we want. Okay, fine, we're going to imprison you and not give a shit about you. Which I was like, this is actually interesting. But let's go to Jefferson. Jefferson, what did you think about this first episode? I know you had probably read it. What's going on?
It was a damn near perfect, almost slimmed down version of what happened in the comics. Like the comics did kind of meander a bit. Like we did, remember that scene where they're like showing like a hospital bed and sleeping sickness is going through the entire world? We were following several stories in that issue. Like we were following a person in Africa in the comic. We were following a person in World War II, all the way till their untimely old age. And it just felt like the show made everything kind of like a more palatable, a more digestible pace. Yeah. The comic does kind of meander a bit in that sense, but like everything else, man, like it was perfect. What Alejandro said about the Roderick Burgess, how he was empathetic, like he was an empathetic character. Fuck no, not in the comic. No, they perfectly that entire storyline is a lot more nicer in the show. It's yeah, no, I without getting into it, like it's I had no empathy for that family at all in the comic. Just to be clear. Let's see. The relationship.
He's like death to them.
Honestly, yeah. Also like a little bit of like Gaiman's like ahead of his timeness, I guess. The relationship between the gardener and the son is in the book, and that's just again like Gaiman just being like on it, like yeah.
Yeah, and so I think for this first episode, obviously he gets out, he goes back, he learns that his realm is in shambles, and then Vivian is like, hey, I'm the only one that stuck around, like, let's just fucking do this. And he's like, fuck, like I have to get my we'd call like a boon, right? Like I have to get my things back because I need to rebuild my realm. And so basically at the end of this episode, we sort of end with that. It sort of ends with the fact that he learns that everything is taken, that everything that he has built that has sustained itself within the realm of dreams has shattered, and people are asleep forever, right? Like, or people can't fall asleep, right? And that's what we've learned in the human world is happening, and people don't know what, and they can't explain what's going on. And so we, that episode, by the way, is called Sleep of the Just. The next episode is called Imperfect Hosts, which now we are exposed to the fact that the Sandman is on a hunt, and Dream is on a hunt to look for his helms, to look for his the ruby, and to look for his pouch of sand. And in this one, Q, hi. Q says, how's everyone tonight? We're good, Q. So happy you're here. I'm so glad you're here. And then Bill said, yeah, I thought it was the international Belgium version because the
no, that's a different thread.
Oh, my bad.
Ignore.
So wait, push to ignore. And then so we get into the second episode where basically the Sandman Dream has to find out where his stuff is at, and he doesn't know. So he goes on a quest to basically ask. He finds out that he doesn't have the power to rebuild what he wants because he's like at his power. Like if his power level was 100, 0 to 100, he's at 1. He's like, I can't fucking do this. And Vivian's like, hey, bitch, like you need to rest. You need some like food. And he's like, no, man. He's like, I need my shit. So then he's like, the only way that I can find out where my stuff is at is I need to ask the Fates. And if you know Greek mythology, there's 3 women. They basically can, you can summon them or tell them, and ask them, 3 questions. And he's like, but I have no power, but I need to find something that I can sort of muster up to summon them, and then I need to give them offerings, right? So basically, he goes into his realm, and there's one thing that he created for Cain and Abel in the second episode. And if you don't know any biblical references to Cain and Abel, they're the brothers that basically loved each other at first, but then betrayal happens, and Cain ends up murdering Abel. Well, in Dream World, Cain does murder Abel multiple times, but then Abel comes back to life. And he's like, oh, he does this all the time. They have a pet like dragon, I believe, in the first part. In the first one, I think the first one was a dragon, no?
Gargoyle.
It's gargoyles. Yeah.
Okay, so they have a gargoyle named Gregory, and Gregory was given to them by Dream. And that is the only thing in the dream world that the Sandman can take in order to regain his power. Long story short, Gregory ends up sacrificing himself. He gets it. He summons the Fates. The Fates basically tell him where his things are at. But in order for him to do that, he actually goes into the ocean of dreams, if I can put it that way. And he finds these things to offer the Fates, which is basically a snake that the Fates want. But also he gets an egg. At the end, he gives the egg back to Cain and Abel. It hatches, and it's a baby gargoyle. So I think in this episode, it kind of made me realize that like the Endless feel like they are sort of in godlike status, but in a sense that Dream feels human in a weird way, where he feels sympathetic towards Cain and Abel because they were pissed, right? Like they didn't want to sacrifice Gregory. They were like, oh my God, I don't know. And he's like, you have no choice. And they're like, what the fuck? Like, you're doing us wrong. Anyway, it sort of showed me a little bit into how the Sandman sort of feels for things. I won't get into episode 3 because that's where I'll talk about the humanity of sort of Dream. But it sort of showed me, I was like, oh, so he kind of does care, even though he's sort of aloof and doesn't really do that. There's a lot more to that episode, but I want to stop talking. Let's talk about episode 2. Let's start with Jefferson. What did you feel about episode 2, about that whole entire episode? Did you feel like it was great? How did it relate to the comic?
I thought it was like a really good, bridge between the origin of what we saw in episode 1 to, I guess, like the current status quo of like finding everything. So this was like if this was Adora's episode, Adora the Explorer episode, this is the part where where the map is explaining all the bullshit. You gotta go do this, and you gotta do this, then you gotta do this. That was this episode to me. And in like the comic, it was kind of like that too. The point that you bring up about Morpheus's humanity, we don't get any of that shit for a long while in the comic. The egg, he never gave the egg in the comic. That wasn't his doing. That was either Cain or Abel. That's I forgot who did it, but it was Cain or Abel that brought that egg. But other than that, yeah, no, this was like a great, like, I guess calm before the storm, if that makes sense, of this season. Also, like, the Fates in the comic just look like the Sanderson sisters, but with extra steps. It's really fascinating how they adapted them. But yeah, no, this is a great episode. I actually am not familiar with Christianity as much. Like, I was raised Catholic, but I don't know jack shit about the lore. So the Cain and Abel thing, I had to Google that. I'm like, yeah, oh, wait, there's a betrayal story there. What was it again? And the show made a pretty cool I guess they made it a pretty cool power to just have Abel come back to life every time he's killed by Cain, and specifically Cain. That's really interesting. It's a really specific power set.
Sure. I also want to briefly mention, because I didn't mention it, there's so much to unpack, ladies and gentlemen, so much to unpack. But I definitely want to mention Ethel Cripps, who was Burgess's mistress, and how she got pregnant in the first episode. He wanted her to abort the the baby. And she was like, fuck that shit. So she took every single one of Dream's, items, and she stole it. She stole all his money and left. In the second episode, we see Ethel Cripps as sort of like a purveyor of fine goods, and she is sort of curating this. How would you say, this antiquarian lifestyle where she finds things for people and sells them to the highest bidder, sells them to people. And the Corinthian comes to her and says, look, bitch, like, I need to know where you hid all this shit, because he's back, he's coming for this shit, and he's probably going to get me and you. And she basically tells him, well, the only thing I really kept, I don't have. She was like, the helm I traded for it was like a necklace of protection. What was, thank you. Yeah. Eye protection. And basically, the ruby, she was like, it was stolen, and the guy's like, oh yeah, well, where's your son? And she's like, well, I don't know, but he took it and I don't know where he's at. Right. Like, I don't know where that's going. And then, the stand obviously was given to, or was, it was auctioned off and it was given to somebody. And so she's like, I have nothing, bro. And he basically comes at her and she's like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to fuck you up with this eye protection. And then basically what it does is it melts him away and then he goes away. So that also happened in the second episode. I don't know how Ethel Cripps is sort of represented in the comics, but I do know that she's a very important part of the first and second episode because she does take all of these things. So let's go to Alejandro. What did you think about second episode? What did you think?
Excuse me. A whole mix of emotions. I was raised in a very open-minded Catholic household. I did take a couple introductions to world religions. The ability that Gaiman had to go ahead and mix almost every religion in the world and make it ability just to be smooth transition was amazing. Cain and Abel are technically the first murderer and the first victim to be murdered. That's the relation. That's why that's specifically powerful, because those two brothers, one would kill the other, one revives itself. It's not like that, obviously, in Bible text or so forth as well. But essentially, I'm sure they kind of manipulate it in a way. But the hints of Buddhism, Hinduism, Catholicism, I mean, everything into just natural spirituality, just in general, it was just smoothly transitioned, because I was baffled. They're like, wait a minute, hold on. We got Dream here. You're telling me your brother and your sister, and there's, wait, what's going on here? And to me, I enjoyed it, but I was surprised that even though I questioned certain things, how pleasant of surprises they were, and how they kind of made the story still transition smoothly. The gargoyle scene made me borderline cry. You only see the gargoyle for like a brief, 3 minutes? And he's like a puppy dog. The CGI I was actually impressed with. His face. Whoever did this, we're going to make these mofos cry, because we're going to make it look like a little golden retriever looking at it. It was just intense. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Come on. I was like, man, no, don't do this to me. Last time I did this was like, no, we won't go there. But anyway, the point is that I thought it was a whole roller coaster of emotions. Yes, you do see Sandman having some sense of empathy in here, but the transitions, damn it, Jefferson hit it nail on the head. It was kind of like a demonic Dora the Explorer. It's like, can you find the ruby? And so, I mean, it was in a sense that, but it's funny. I can laugh at it and still actually enjoy the little path they took to get there. The cast is amazing. I kind of thought, being able to hate Cain and still be like, it's a good actor. God, I hate him. And still being, in that ability there as well. And the story went into more in depth, showing like human emotion. Got the Cain and Abel situation here, showing that there's a toxic relationship, and yet one person still wants the love from another, and it's his brother. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He's willing to be murdered by him, and it's crazy, because you think about it, and there's a lot of relationships out there that are kind of like that. I want to see the best in this person. I'll be, unfortunately, I'll be willing to go through all this and stuff. But unfortunately, death doesn't exactly revive everyone here on Earth. So seeing this and seeing his ability revive itself is really like, whew, that is really intense. You have this ability to run away, but yet you come back every single time because he's your brother. Man, but yeah, I just thought it was great. Just the ability to take this world, this world that he actually meshed so many hints of different religions and concepts around the world, so I think many could actually understand it. But yeah, there's another thing that I actually want to mention here, because Neil Gaiman made a tweet years ago, and I think it was a whole bunch of anti-LGBTQ people were hitting him,
Yeah.
and what he said, it was brilliant. He said, "Oh yeah," he goes, "it was my agenda to make every single relationship that you saw in there gay. It was my agenda," and it was this is ability just to be a smart ass and say, "Look, it's just what I made my characters. I'm proud of who they are, and I'm not going to argue against it. You got a problem? Fuck off." And it was great, the ability to see an author just stand up for his choice, and be like, "Hey, I'm not tiptoeing," stuff like that. It was fantastic. It was really great. But I digress. I thought it was intense.
Go real quick, just to add on to that. Like, I'm not gatekeeping. I'm all for people like getting into something I just got into during the pandemic.
Mhm.
But like, there's so many like, I guess like people calling this. Can I use the W word here?
Yeah, say it.
I can't. There's too many people calling this thing woke, like the show woke, and I'm like, no, come on, guys. Like Neil Gaiman was woke before it was woke. Like he's been doing this. No,
Yeah, he's been doing it for a while, yeah.
And I also think it's like representational from all the other like shows and books that he's written, right? Like it wasn't for him, it wasn't a thing. Like it was just like, this is what happens, this is what's naturally going to happen in my writing, this is what's naturally going to happen. And I feel like when I first heard about Neil Gaiman, I was like, I love you, right? Like it was a thing where I was just like, this is how it should be. Like it shouldn't be a thing. Like it shouldn't be something where like when I was watching the Sandman and I was sitting there and then I was like, oh, but me, like, right, with anything, when the son was like, when they grabbed hands and like in the first episode and they were on the bench, I was like, so my reaction was like, oh, I was like, saw that coming like a mile away. But it wasn't a thing because I also do that for straight couples, and for any other couple I was like, oh, like, right. And I think for me too, like it was also the fact that like one of them was white, one of them was black, right? And like you wouldn't normally see that in those, like in that sort of like time era, like in where it happened. And so I was like, like I'm kind of loving this. And then just every single relationship that came out of that, and in further episodes, I was like, this is fucking great. Like, this is my show. Yes, absolutely. Right. And I just, yeah, I just feel like it was natural to me. And I was like, great. Like, this is exactly what I wanted. But I want to get to Bill. Bill, what did you think about the second episode? Did you feel like it added on to the first? Did you feel like
it very much did? And kind of touching on what you guys think, for me, whenever people start blathering about things being woke, I run it through the filter of, in their crappy kind of way, they're saying that something feels like it was being forced into a thing, and nothing here has that feeling to me. And especially when you're talking things about the figures of desire and death and dreams, it's like their gender, singular, plural, or all points in between, is so irrelevant, because they're an aspect of the universe anyway. They're not a person, and so it's kind of like what they choose is completely arbitrary, and just happens to speak to them, which is why I just didn't really see it. I was interesting about the replacement golden gargoyle. For me, it's a little bit, I choose to decide that I'm torn on it as to whether I think that he was doing it as a repayment and trying to make up for Cain and Abel, or was he actually sorry more for the creature that he actually asked if it was okay and he was replacing it. And so it's less, the critter needs to be taken care of by somebody, and he and the librarian sure aren't it. So here's to where, one, they'll take care of it, but I don't actually know that he was doing them a favor, because he doesn't really strike me as a sort of individual that it wasn't theirs to give. He brought it to them once, he'll take it. He giveth, he taketh away, right? And so, but in his case, who he asked wasn't them. He asked, what was the gargoyle's name again?
Gregory.
He asked Gregory and Gregory gave it of himself, so he gave it back. And so I'm like, I kind of choose to kind of take that route with him. But as we explore more about the kind of what are the powers, and I like that he chose not to go into the okay, it's a quest. He gets to go re-get his bits back. And at least what I've taken from it so far is not that it is, sorry, the dog is barking, is not expressly because sir, what I'm on the thing, is not because he has either his powers come from these things. The power is him. What he even talks about, one of the pieces later, is that it's more that he had gotten lazy and put too much of his power, and he became used to it as a crutch, and that was his hubris. So it's kind of a examination of that, rather than really, he's kind of like a midland power eternal, but has to have all these magical items to actually make it work. It feels like that's not really the case. These are just kind of totems that these entities do that kind of help them focus and do what they do. But in his case, he used them as too much of a crutch and gave that stuff away. Now he's picking pieces back up again. But I mean, I like this. It's not that's like, it's always a story writing problem when you have effectively deities that are running around. It's like, okay, they can do everything except for this story where I need to make them imperfect for some reason. And so far, at least for the story that we've gotten thus far, I didn't see them being that. They are still as deities, right? They're just, they have caused themselves their own limitations in various ways. And so that to me, that makes better sense, because you can't really, if they're gonna be all powerful, they're all powerful, period. The only thing that changed that is themselves. Sorry, rambling on, but that's right. And I very much like it. It for me, again, not being a reader of it thus far, but I definitely want to get into reading this stuff.
That was can you repeat that again? The only thing that makes them, what was that? The thing about all powerful. Sorry.
Well, so like the only thing that can impinge their being all powerful is themselves.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's like they're ending up giving themselves their own. And fortunately, we haven't done another writing trope, which would be, they have like some sort of internal emotional block. So they, Spider-Man can't throw webs for a while because he's, heartache, whatever. This isn't that. Because again, to do that too much would imply that these are humans, and they're not. These are ones who got lazy. They took an easy way out, whatever. When Dream gets back to his realm, he's actually kind of surprised that everyone has rolled out and everything, and it's kind of bailed on him. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, they've been they can sit around picking their nose for 100 years.
Yeah.
There has to be some impetus, and he's kind of learning where his limitations are with what he set things up to be. And so I found it, for me, it episode 2, we finally start kind of deepening the mythos that's around these characters, what they can do, what they can't do. He has his scope of powers, but he can't compel the fates, because that's not his realm. He can do everything to everybody, but he can't make the 3 witches say better. However, any good gamer would have worked out their wishes a lot earlier than throwing them out like that. You want to be really specific whenever you're asking for wishes.
That's not a true statement has ever been said. I just want to point out that in the second episode, you learn that Dream has siblings, right? They call each other siblings, and they are Destiny, Death, Destruction, Despair, Desire, and Delirium, who was formerly known as Delight. These are all in the back of me. But if you were a good person, or not really, but if you were a true diehard fan of Sandman, you definitely wanted to know who was going to play who.
Oh boy, what to talk about.
yeah. And for me, it was a dream to learn that a lot of these characters that are going to be played by these individuals were either LGBTQ, trans, or sort of any. Yeah, and it was all encompassing, and I feel like you can look at my background and say, oh, I know exactly who's going to play them, right? But in a sense, like, I think Bill has a good point, where it was like, these are just entities, like gender isn't a thing for them. They're just existing. But they also are a product of humanity, right? Like they also are a product of what we experience in the world. They all begin with D's, right? And I feel like we, you know, when Vivienne says, "Oh, you could ask one of your siblings," and Dream goes, "They didn't come to my aid. They didn't help me break free from my prison. So why am I going to ask them?" Which is why he turns to the Fates, which is a huge like risk for him because, as you said, as Bill said, this was some like you cannot control the Fates, right? Like you can only give them something, and then they can like be like, like I don't know, am I going to help you? I don't know, right? Like, and so I feel like that was a major aspect of learning how you might see him like on a pedestal as like a god, but in the end, like he's limited to like to everything that he does into any realm that he goes into, even on Earth, right? Like he can only do so much before he's like, yeah, like I gotta find my shit because I can't really control what you do. And then they're like, so why am I helping you? Right? Like, you know, and it's like it's like it's just like an endless battle. What did we just really quick as we reach the end of, you know, towards the end of what's going on, how did we feel about the acting? How did we feel about the characters? Let's start with you, Alejandro. How did we feel about who played who in episodes 1 and 2? Did we feel like it was spot on? Did we feel like it could have, you know, needed improvement?
So for me, initially, the cast was amazing. You know, coming into it and what they've done, I will say that I was only familiar with only two of them. So that was the thing with me, surprised with me, the fact that we find out that who is actually Wilkin Vivian Lucien, that actually is, you know, I've seen her, I've very experienced with her work, so it was amazing to see what she was doing. Given the fact that, you know, Patton Oswalt, I heard his, you know, immediately heard his voice in a sense. I was like, okay, I'm really familiar with that. I'm not familiar with Tom Sturges. So, like, to be honest with you, so when I actually seen this, it was one of those things where I said it could have went disastrous because going to the whole concept of, you know, being, I would say, quiet. I only saw physical movements, you know, and I was a little nerve-wracked because you got people out there that you'll see do a certain character and then they're like prolongedly stuck in that character. And to me, it does seem like I'm gonna be a little cheesy here. He was like an onion, there was layers. So I feel like there was like some sense of difference there at least too as well. The supporting cast, I mean, even for you're looking at Cain and Abel, they had what at 8 lines the most, and they were amazing. It was just fantastic. I just think that, you know, you got to give not only the actors the credit due as well, but hopefully the screen. I mean, Neil Gaiman's amazing. That means that he has a lot of control in which, you know, the writing, obviously. But once again, going back to the acting, I thought the acting was fantastic. I know it's really generic, but it was great, spot on. Couldn't ask for, honestly, another actor. So can't wait to see the next episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, what did you think about the acting? What did you think about the characters they played?
Good all the way along. I mean, for me, Cain and Abel were probably, of the lineup that we've seen in the first 2 episodes, were probably they were not bad. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm suggesting, but they weren't quite. They kind of felt like they were there to kind of service that storyline right there. So they were kind of a little bit more quick sketch characters, and probably know we'll get more into them again later if they pop back up again. But there hasn't been anyone that's been distracting or taking things away or everything. And everyone has those moments. And even actually, as I'm thinking about between Cain and Abel, it's when Abel has that conversation talking about, you know, it's who he is, right? About the killing him thing. And it's kind of like you said, it's those sorts of relationships. We know people in him, we know people that stick with him, but he's heartfelt in what he's saying. So all of these things ring it's a supernatural story with everything going on. But at the same time, all of the challenges that they are kind of facing within themselves is all relatable. And so I find that compelling along the way as well.
That's great. And last but not least, Jefferson, what did you feel about the casting? Did you feel like it was representative of the comic? Did you feel like, you know, there could have been improvement? What's going on?
I did think it was shocking at first, like going by, like just seeing side by side who was being casted for who. But after the fact, it's like, oh yeah, you know what? Hold on, no, this makes sense. Like when I looking at the comic, it's like this is pretty, for all the imaginative that for all the imagination that Gaiman puts into this, it's pretty fucking white, not gonna lie. And so with this casting, it's like, yeah, I think this could have used a bit of, I guess, like, I hate using the word race bending, or you know what I mean? You know, it could have used a bit more color. And in this scenario, it works. Like, the Endless are, I guess they're so malleable. They can look like whatever the fuck you want, however you perceive them. So this works. Everything else was I guess like changing Lucien to Lucy N was really cool too. Lucien is a dude in the comic too, another white dude with glasses, and she was perfect as the role. Who was that as Lucien?
Vivian.
Sorry, I just had it up. I'm looking it up now.
She was great.
Vivian Akimenpong.
There it is.
I can't pronounce her last name. With anything, I need to go ahead and learn that so I can butcher it.
Right. I'm also not familiar with anybody here except for Jenna Coleman, Patton Oswalt, and spoiler characters later. We'll get to them later. But yeah, no, I'm coming in with almost nothing with the main cast. Like, I have no preconceived notions and I'm having a blast.
Yeah. I think for me, the first 2 episodes were absolutely amazing. I think the actors did a phenomenal job. I think they added a hint and added something for me that I was like, if it was different people and it was acted a different way, I don't know if I'd be that into it. You know what I mean? Even when it comes to the Corinthian, and even when it comes to, Crips, you're right. It's like mostly a white cast, but at the same time, you have people like Lucien, and later on we'll start to experience like other, casts that are, of color, or that can contribute to this entire series. But I feel like for now, for the first 2 episodes, it hooked me in a way where I was like, I want to know more, and I want to experience this whole thing regardless, right? And I think it's just very interesting to see the dynamic between everybody that's in this entire in these first 2 episodes, but not only the first 2 episodes, but the entire series. Any last minute thoughts? Any last minute things about the Sandman? Are you excited? Are you like, what's going on? Alejandro, let's go to you.
I'm just hyped. I got way ahead of the game, so let's just say that I'm really excited to talk about the next couple coming up. Once again, it's just the story writing, the acting, just everything all together. I think it was surprising to me because I wasn't familiar with the cast. I was not familiar with the comics. So coming into this, I was coming in blind and ready to, be introduced to a world that I did actually have American Gods. So I was like, all right, I know at least the writer has a great form of writing. So I was like, all right, that's the one thing I'm familiar with. So all in all, I'm very, very pleasantly surprised and can't wait to talk about the other episodes.
I love it. Jefferson, any last minute thoughts?
We saw a glimpse of a main player in the 3rd episode coming up in the 2nd episode, Joanna Constantine. I already saw that episode and it's fucking great. And I can't wait to talk about Jenna Coleman in that episode. Other than that, hold on to your butts when we get to 24/7 Diner.
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about that fully because I was like, I feel like I need to watch it again. So that was the 5th episode, everyone. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Another side real quick. There's a fan film online, a really well-made Sandman fan film that just adapts that issue. Really well made. That's just 24/7 Diner in its entirety, and it's great. So is the audiobook too.
Yeah, we will talk about that when we get to episode 5 and 6. But yeah, I need to watch that again because I was like, what is going on? Anyway, Bill, any last minute thoughts about this?
You guys have already said it really well. That it kicks off those first episodes. It gets you into the world. It gets you hyped and excited and enjoying it. And just kind of, it's woe to those who start it too late in the evening and have to go to work the next morning because they're up for a very really long
Terrible.
night.
Yeah.
Did you all of it in one day or not?
I did 6 in one day, and then I finished it out the next.
Yeah.
Might do that
again,
tonight.
coming into a cold, which I mean, the only other series I've done that with any time recently, and it was only a half hour per episode series, and that was The Bear. So, you know, and I jammed that one in just one sitting. But this one is really good. And like I said, my only complaint that I'll just as a spoiler is, damn it, I wanted Constantine in more of the overall stories because she was so good. Wish she was in more stuff, but it's kind of like almost all the characters, when they pop up, they are never wasted. It's kind of like, oh my God, I want more of that. All of the, you know, almost every characters, they could have a spin-off. And perfectly happy with them.
There's a whole Sandman universe comic series where everyone has a spin-off.
Well, yeah, it's called DC, right? Since don't forget, in the end, Sandman is DC universe.
Yep.
So when DC Vertigo DC?
Yes.
There it is.
Label
I would just say, if you haven't given the series a chance, give it a chance. It's amazing. You know, most of the people that I have told to watch it have watched it, and it's been like, I like it, so I love it. And you know, I haven't really gotten any, it wasn't my thing. And I'm like, okay, well, bye. But
Colby, actually, real quick.
Yeah.
How do you pitch this show to your friends? Like, I'm having a hard time, like, just like convincing some people, like, yo, please check this out. How do you guys do it?
I did it by telling people this series is everything that you had hoped American Gods would have been.
Yeah, I
love that.
Because in the end, it is American Gods, because it's all the gods with the different aspects and stuff like that. But this one holds its cohesion together. Where, you know, where American Gods, we had one good season, but even then it was not exactly balanced all the way through because of the production of this series. I'll slam that one just on the overall studio and production going along with all that, and not a fault of Gaiman's. But this series, that whole season is kind of like, so that's how I usually pitch it is, hey, remember you went into American Gods being excited and then disappointed? Do this. You'll scratch that itch.
I kind of like that. I've told people that, you know, I know would be interested in this. I'm like, hey, you have to watch this, give it like the first episode. And if you're not into it, then by all means, don't watch it. But I tell them, I'm like, this is something that is deeper than you would normally think it would be. And you're like, it's something you're not going to expect. And then they watch it and they're like, holy crap, I'm on episode 4 already. And it's like, maybe, maybe 3 hours later, and they're like, I'm on episode 4. And I'm like, see, I told you. And they're like, yeah, it's great. So, I mean, it's different. I mean, it's different with everybody. Like I said, I haven't met anybody yet that hasn't liked this series or that hasn't seen it. So, but before we end, I would like to know, where can we find you all? Where can we find your thoughts, feelings, your hurts, your wants, your needs, your dreams, your nightmares? Where can we find you? Let's start with Jefferson.
Yo, yeah, I'm Jefferson. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Twitch, now on Twitch, and YouTube as Jeffersaurus. That's Jeffersaurus with a W. Yeah.
He's his own dinosaur, everybody, so keep that in mind.
That's awesome.
Yes. Bill, where can we find you?
Bill RW and the number 3 on most social platforms, and then you can find me writing on nerdbot.com and anywhere else that'll let me put a couple of words together.
Great, we love it. Alejandro, where can we find you?
You can find me on all the socials. First one, Twitter, where I talk a bunch of trash in my mind, so that'd be Crimson Cowie, CRIMSON COWIE. Then on Instagram, and IAMCOWIE. I do a daily skits, comedic things, you name it, it's up there. I have fun. And give the TikTok a shout out too as well, AAMCOWIE, where I do the exact same stuff.
We love it. We love repetition. We love you promoting yourself, and we also love everyone here. You can find me on Instagram. It's CityOfStars13. I am on TikTok. I don't know what my handle is, but I don't know. We'll figure it out one day. But I would like to say thank you all for joining us. That is all the time that we have to talk about episodes 1 and 2 of The Sandman. If you haven't watched it, too bad, you've been spoiled. Watch it. It's been amazing. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to join in and join our Discord to keep the conversation going. Shout out to my guests, Jefferson, Alejandro, and Bill. You all are amazing. You always bring the heat when you all are on the show. So thank you all so much. And you can listen to our show on Google Podcasts, Spotify, or where you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch. All of our platforms are at Nom Talk Network. Tune in also to our next show, which is going to be the Event Horizon 25th anniversary, which is going to be Monday night. Oh my God. This movie is, oh my God. I don't want to talk about it. Liam Neeson, I don't want to talk about it.
20th?
Yeah.
What?
But, wait, what'd you say?
20th anniversary?
25th.
20, what the? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Age yourself. But until then, I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and I hope you all have a nomorific evening. Good night. We love you.
Nom nom.